My name's Marley Morris. I was on the Emergence of the Far Right panel, and this was the third and final session, and we talked a bit about how to find solutions to challenge of the emergence of the far right in the last few years, and we talked about we kind of structured our thoughts into three main frameworks. So first of all, one response to the challenge of the far right that we talked about was the politics of goodness, and the idea here was that because in order to foster closer contact between migrants and people who are concerned about immigration, we need to build mutual empathy between those two groups. We need to humanise migrants. We need to find ways to build common ground between those groups to facilitate opportunities for people to interact with each other and to build cohesion in local areas. And there were lots of examples that we talked about at the local level of that working in practice. So the second kind of framework that we talked about was the politics of anger, and there we talked about how you could mobilise both migrants and native workers to work together for a common goal. So for instance about promoting labour rights. So how you can work, build basically a common goal between migrants and non-migrants with a common antagonist in a way. So in some ways we thought that could be quite positive, but could also be quite dangerous because you're automatically using the politics of anger, which is oppositional, which is antagonistic, and that can obviously has a risk of backfiring. And the third thing we talked about was the politics of power, and here we talked about how you could think of power structures in a different way to try and respond to the challenge of the emergence of the far right. And the way that we mainly focused on was this idea of reconceiving patriotism in a progressive way that was inclusive of migrants. And there was some debate in the group about whether that was a good thing, because you could use a very powerful tool, the idea of patriotism, and that you could use that in a way that is inclusive and that speaks to people directly at a very rooted and emotional level, but on the other hand there was some concern that it could be risky or dangerous because patriotism can easily turn to nationalism and it can become exclusive. So those were the three main things we talked about, and then we talked about how we're going to develop that as part of our presentation for tomorrow.
And did you come up with any sort of snappy recommendations out of all this discussion, or was it left as a sort of, we have at least identified some ideas?
Well, those were the kind of the ideas. I mean, each of those ideas, I think, has recommendations sort of built within them. So the politics of goodness, there's this idea of finding common spaces at the local level. So whether that's some work around going into schools, for instance, to talk to people of different backgrounds and to kind of expose people to different ways of life, to different ways of thinking, to kind of challenge preconceptions, or kind of very simple things about, like in a local community, if kids might be tempted by radical ideas, giving them something else to do, giving them a football to play around, rather than being tempted by these ideas. And then we talked about other things within the other concepts. So, for instance, the politics of anger. We talked about the common struggle, an idea of promoting labour rights both for migrants and non-migrants. So obviously there are specific things in different national contexts for how you can do that. There are particular employment rights that you could fight for that could both, on the one hand, prevent the exploitation of migrants, but at the same time could also put people more at ease with the idea of migration if they feel that their livelihoods and jobs are being secured and protected. So those are the kinds of things we talked about.